So thanks for being here, everybody. My name is Carissa Finley, and I am the brand president at Class 101. So I would love to welcome you. If you're just joining us, please go into the chat, say hello, let us know where you're joining us from. But welcome to parents, families, students, friends of students, and all of our Class 101 family. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Like I said, we'll be taking questions throughout the webinar. We've got some really fantastic speakers, and you can place those in the Q&A. So jump into the Q&A at any time today that you have questions, and we will be sharing those with our speakers. So let's go ahead and get started. For those of you who are brand new to Class 101, what we do is college planning. And our mission is to help students so that they can find the best schools. How we do this is pretty simple. Like, we make college planning simple. So our mission, like I said, is to help students so that they can find the best schools. We want to help them increase test scores, become a competitive applicant, leverage as many scholarship opportunities as possible, and ultimately reduce the cost of college for your family. But things have been a little chaotic lately in college admissions, haven't they? This year, especially, you may have seen some articles calling, 2024 the craziest college admissions season ever, or posts that say, confusion around college admissions mount. There was even a Wall Street Journal article that I saw that came out in March titled, "The Most Confusing, Chaotic College Admission Season in Years." So you may be feeling some stress as a lot of changes are happening, and you may have some questions about what all of this means for yourself or your future college applicant. Well, that is why Class 101 has brought together some really special guests today to help us navigate these changes and adapt to what's happening in the college admissions process. So I would like to introduce our special guest. The first one is Mandy Castro. She is the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Texas Christian University. Mandy has served TCU in undergraduate admissions for almost 7 years, overseeing the areas of student search, access initiatives, transfer admissions, first-year admissions, and the regional admissions team. Before that, Mandy spent over a dozen years in the admission and recruitment office of her alma mater, the University of Oklahoma. A double major in Spanish and psychology and a master's in organizational dynamics with an emphasis in project management helped her really find her niche in admissions, where she loves statistics and data. Rennie Cook is also joining us. Rennie is the owner of Class 101 in Norman, Oklahoma, as well as the Prosper Frisco area in Texas. Rennie is an international speaker, trainer, and podcaster. He spent almost 15 years in higher education, serving in admissions, student affairs, and alumni affairs. During that time, he was also involved on admissions and scholarship committees. And today, he spends his time as an entrepreneur in the professional training and development space. He and his, may I say, lovely wife, Stacy, are the proud owners of 2 of the highest performing Class 101 franchises in the country. So we are excited to have you both here. Our session today will be a Q&A style. So we have some hot topics prepared, but like I mentioned earlier, we'd love for you to jump into the chat to share your questions with our expert guests. So let's dive in. Rennie, I'll kick it over to you first. Maybe you can start by sharing what are some of the challenges that you're seeing with your Class 101 students this year that's making 2024 seem unusually chaotic?
Well, thank you, Carissa, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this webinar. Good to see my friend Mandy, Mandy, some of you don't know, Mandy and I don't go way back to college. We knew each other during our time at the University of Oklahoma, and I've just enjoyed a great relationship with Mandy for decades. I'll tell you how I would wrap up, how would I sum up what's changed? And I think it's just got to be just how much change and how much competitiveness has really increased in the entire admissions process. When you think about admission standards and practices, they are changing. Specifically an easy one to highlight is around standardized tests. Seeing things from everything from schools who are test blind, test optional, and what that really means at different schools and how that's changing to those schools who are now deciding that the test is a required standard that admissions officers are going to consider. So just the change around standardized test, even just how a standardized test is even delivered. We've seen in 2024 that the College Board has moved the SAT from a paper test only to now it is only a digital test. So just around those admission practices, we've seen lots of change. And I think the data also shows, and Mandy can speak to this probably better than I can, especially since she's a statistics nerd. So she can talk to you about how many applicants, just the influx of applicants to schools has made the competition for those limited spots at each school just that much more competitive. So you see the standards and the practices changing, and you see just the number of applicants changing. All of that change leads to just a more competitive environment. I don't know. What do you think, Mandy? What have you seen from your seat?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that. I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania right now at the Common App Conference. I speak here tomorrow, and one of the things that they have told us is that students are applying to more schools. There's not more students in the pipeline. There are more applications in the field, which makes our jobs infinitely more challenging. And the students are just presenting at a really high level. They're using their resources, they're accessing all that they need to fill out a wonderful application. And then when we have so many of them to review with a finite number of spots, it's become even more challenging for us. So I wholeheartedly agree there. I think that the FAFSA efficiencies that they created have proven quite inefficient. And we have seen major delays with students getting financial aid offers. And not that the students missed an admission deadline. They've got their admission decisions. They just haven't been able to make a final decision, not having all of the financials in front of them. So I think that that has been something that we knew was going to be a challenge, and it's just kind of delayed and delayed and delayed the students in their decision-making process. And then we have seen an interesting shift. This is one that we hadn't really anticipated. And I've been in this career long enough that I've been working with millennials now for my entire career. And now I'm working with the next generation of students who behave very differently in the application and admission process. This is an interesting change because where we used to nudge students along and we had sequential pieces that they did at certain times, and they knew if they submitted an application early, they could then come in and fill in the teacher recommendation and the counselor rec and submit an essay later on occasions. Now they're waiting until they've tied a bow on the whole package to hit submit, and they do it on the deadline day. On the deadline day, which is driving us bananas, y'all. Do it early. Give your teachers and counselors and others time to collect it all. But just the behaviors of students have changed, I think.
I think one thing, I'll jump in here. I think one thing I've tied or see changed tied to increased applications that a student is submitting is what I call whimsical applications. Oh, I might as well apply. I've done all this. I might as well apply to this school, see what happens, right? And it's just I'm like, as a college planner, you're asking, how serious are you about really attending that school? And I see some of it as ego driven. I just want to say that I got admitted here. And so that's some of the I don't think that's necessarily a new change, but because of the Common App there, it's much easier for students to make those what I'd call either ego driven or just whimsical to see what could happen submissions. So it is a massive work that students are putting in, but also just the load that is on our admissions officers and colleges is really amazing.
Yeah, great list. That's a great list. I want to dive into some of those deeper. I'm glad that you brought up the digital SAT and some of the test optional policies. Mandy, why don't I start with you? Like, what impacts have the digital SAT had on students compared to the traditional SAT?
So that's an interesting question. From the college admission end, Not a lot. So that's interesting because Rennie's going to tell you a different side of the story here in just a minute. Um, when we get digital SAT submissions, they come through in a data feed. They map to a student's record. The student to use it on their TCU application. So for us, not a ton has changed on just the test administration and receipt side. What I will say is that many schools, either district-wide or statewide, have started to partner with SAT, and they've started to administer the exam instead of on a weekend in a school day. And the problem with that is that whenever they do that, the students no longer enter what we call student search. So the availability for a college like mine to be able to find you in the mass of students who are taking the exams. A lot of data privacy laws have governed this, which is we want students' identities protected. We want their PII to be absolutely secure in any data transfers, et cetera. However, there are strict regulations against anything that is a digital administration of an exam and how third parties can access the student's information. So now it's really challenging because the high school counselor and those at Class 101 have to be the people who are connecting you to colleges and universities if your institution has administered an exam in this way. Or you need to be proactive, and this is where you get our tips in the process here of either reaching out to one of us via Naviance if your school uses Naviance, or SCORE, or putting your profile in niche and reaching out to the colleges. Use the College Board connection piece if you're taking an SAT and you've reached out, you've found some schools that you're interested in. But it's making it more challenging for us to seek you out simply because of the data privacy laws that have changed. So I know that's not your score in administration, but from our end, it does impact us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Mandy. Rennie, with some schools retracting their test optional policies, like you had mentioned earlier, what factors should students consider when deciding to submit their standardized test scores?
You know, the simple one-word answer to that question is it depends. Because what you're seeing is every school has a different policy around tests. You know, if you look at the California System School, you know, the UCLA's, the UC Berkeley's, the UC schools, for a while now, several years, they just don't even consider the test, right? Test blind. They're not going to look at an ACT or an SAT score. COVID with the, you know, is when we really saw the, you know, the beginning of test optional practices. For those of you who don't remember, I remember working with students during that time where literally they would get their confirmation email on Thursday that you're going to go take your test at this school. Here's your ticket, show up. And they would show up on that Saturday morning at 7:30, 7:45. And on the door, there would be no test today. The proctor was exposed to COVID. So that is where really, I mean, and Mandy can correct me if I'm wrong, you really only saw no choice from higher education institutions to go test optional because students couldn't take the test. They just could not get on the sites and to take tests. Well, now what we're seeing is a few years later, now students are not having problems taking the standardized test. You see now schools are looking at what I'm assuming is their data on the success of those students to make decisions on whether they want to implement the test back or not. And some schools are, we've already seen some of the most competitive schools in the country already announced that beginning next year, they are requiring the test again. You are seeing schools make a lot of different decisions. And as we move into the next application cycle, our advice to you is to really make sure you understand how your school that you're interested in applying to is going to use standardized tests as a admissions criteria. I would tell you this though, standardized tests for higher education institutions are used in a variety of ways. They could be used for admissions, right? They could be used for scholarships. And I haven't really seen a large move in how some of the larger scholarships at schools have continued to use the ACT as a measuring point. I see at some schools a third way the ACT and the SAT is used as kind of as a placement measurement. So you've decided to attend school and you're going to school. They want to see those ACT scores, specifically maybe in the math area, to decide what area of math you're going to start off at college. So not only are these tests used for admissions, they're also used for scholarships, they're used for placement. And so you really have to understand how that is used. So it depends on the school. I tell students all the time, even if it's test optional, prep and take the test. Because what happens if you perform well and it's just another reason why you're giving that school to admit you, or giving you another reason why a scholarship committee should give you a scholarship? Then you have the option to use it or not.
Yeah, that's great. So then, speaking of a specific school, Mandy, can you tell us like what TCU's policy is and how you guys look at test scores?
Yeah, absolutely. Rennie is 100% correct. So as you make your college list, you actually have to do the legwork on how schools are treating the test in their process. Some places you can submit a test and then they can't unsee it. Others are truly test blind, and regardless of whether you took it or not, they're never going to look at it at all. While others give you the option to toggle in or out of selecting whether to use it. At TCU, we are truly test optional. We have been in a test phase of this since the COVID pandemic. So a little bit about TCU. We have historically undervalued the test in our admission process, simply because it's like a picture that you're going to post to Instagram, right? It's either the good hair day with the perfect angle, or you don't look great and you're not putting it out for everyone to see. That's how we look at the test. It's a snapshot on one day. It is not your overall ability.
Yeah.
So we had always devalued the test in our evaluation of candidates. And if it didn't help a student, we actually kicked it out for them. Then the pandemic hit, and like Rennie described, there's no longer availability. Only the students who were very wealthy and had access to travel to other states where maybe they were hosting tests were able to get in. And that just seems very unethical and unfair for us to say, you have to do this if only a small margin of the population has access to it. So what we decided as an institution is to truly take a look at test optional. This gave us an opportunity on campus to evaluate our student resources and see if we had enough to bubble wrap you once you got to campus without us knowing what that test score was. Our retention rate has remained at 94%. So I'll do a little brag on TCU there, go Frogs. But we're doing the right things by providing the resources that students need. Now, if you submit a test score to me, I will continue to overlook it if it doesn't benefit you in the admission process. If you've submitted a test score and you've gained admission and you used your test score, however, the test score holds you back a scholarship tier, we're going to evaluate your application both with the test score and without it for scholarship purposes, and we will give you the higher of the awards which you earned.
That's really helpful. Yeah, thank you. So that kind of leads us in our next discussion topic, which is like the cost of college. And Mandy, you had mentioned this earlier, FAFSA. Maybe it's a question for both of you, but Mandy, maybe I can start with you. In what ways have the updates to FAFSA affected the process this year? And how might these updates affect students and families applying for financial aid in the future?
Sure. So this year, everything has just been delayed. They've had, and I think that what they did is they really intended to put out an effective product that reduced 120 questions down to 36. Unfortunately, I think what we received was a beta product, and they're still working out all the kinks. So this year, it's just been a challenge for the students to get the FAFSA submitted. It was late opening. Typically, it will open in October of the senior year. So just because it had all of these challenges with it this year, we're hopeful that it'll turn a corner over the next year. So far, it's looking like it will still be delayed to open. So be prepared for that. Please know, though, that many schools, if you're looking at selective institutions or private schools like TCU, we use a document called the CSS profile as well. It's always in conjunction with the FAFSA, but many schools who used the profile this year were able to administer financial aid awards early. so students could know what we would give them in the way of grant. We really don't care what they submitted on the FAFSA at that point. We'll reconcile that on the back end later. And I foresee us continuing to work like that moving forward. And I bet that the CSS profile also gains a lot more participating schools after this debacle this year.
Yeah, that's a great take. Rennie, what about from your perspective? How did the FAFSA impact your students?
I think there's just a lot of confusion. Yeah, there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of impatience, and at the end of the day, the reality is that college costs money, and for a majority of families and students who are making a decision on where to attend college, money is a major factor in that decision-making process, and unfortunately, families didn't have that information to understand really what their investment would be. So those changes and those delays really increased the stress. It put families in situations to where they felt like they were making a decision based on partial information.
Right.
And so that was really unfortunate. You saw some schools who would bend on the deadline to let them know, and you saw some schools not bend. And I don't judge them either way, because as a former person in higher education, there's enrollment issues, there's housing issues, those things that just can't be avoided, that an institution has to prepare for, and they have to have time to prepare for that to make sure the first day of class people are ready to go to school. But at the end of the day, I think all of us can agree the person who suffered through this process was the student and their families. Just more stress about probably one of the most important factors in attending and deciding on where to attend school.
I
Yeah,
agree
that's
with that,
great.
Rennie. And
Okay.
I know that I mentioned that TCU did go out with our aid offers early based on other information. And even the market told the students, don't move yet. So we give you
Yeah.
your offer. Some students had the full cost of tuition. They might have had a phenomenal scholarship and a great aid award, but they still didn't move because the market told them not to, just because of the delays. So again, with the student behavior, deadline driven, and all the different changes, that was one of the pieces that we saw.
I saw from a few families too, Mandy, less confidence in what the future would hold.
Yeah.
So what do I mean by that? They would get an aid package that maybe hit the numbers they were confident in for the first year, but more so than ever, because they've always known aid is a year-to-year issue, more so than ever, I saw this year people really questioning whether they could count on that for year 2, year 3, year 4. And so it kind of, the lack of credibility in the process kind of created some doubt in the end product as well.
I agree. If for the families who are on the call, if you haven't been through the FAFSA lately, if you don't understand the financial aid awarding process, if you don't understand how colleges and universities look at this, that's something to maybe dig into with Class 101, just to learn more about it. I think that that's a really important piece of the puzzle, and I think it's something that will help you as you navigate the college admission process.
I would add that one of the things that, many times you might be on this call and you're thinking, well, this doesn't apply to me. This doesn't, and so I spent several years as the Dean of Students at the University of Oklahoma. And it seems like without fail, every semester a student would come to me and something had turned their financial circumstances upside down. Something that had happened in their family, something that had happened, it just an unfortunate scene in events that dramatically changed the availability of cash for that family. And I want you to think about this. It's the middle of the semester. You can withdraw, but you've already paid for the semester. You're not going to get your money back. You have a lease on your apartment. You're not going to get out of this lease on your apartment. You have commitments to be made, and now you do not have the availability of cash. Well, a student who came to me with that problem that had completed their FAFSA, oh, so easy. I send it to financial aid, and all financial aid has to do is turn on that loan that they didn't accept. They have to turn on that aid that they didn't accept, and it's right there. And now this stressful situation is still stressful, but at least we fixed the financial side of this. Also, I've had students come and say the same issue, but they never applied for financial aid. They did not have a FAFSA on file. And now this stressful situation gets to continue for weeks. And sometimes it's really hard to find a solution. Different institutions are able to help in different ways, but we still have this cash problem that has weeks to pan out. And now your apartment needs rent paid. The groceries still need to be paid. So no matter where you're at and thinking about, well, I wouldn't qualify, it's so important just as an insurance to have this document on file, just in case the unforeseen happens for you and your family, and you don't lose all that tuition, all those fees that you paid for a semester because you have to bring your student home because you can't pay for them to live.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot to learn, like what you were saying about the FAFSA, Mandy. And so if you are coming into the class of 2025, I encourage you to follow us at Class 101 because we do a FAFSA webinar in the fall. As you get closer to filling out this form and you have more questions, we've got some great resources for you there too. So follow along because we'll get that information out to you in the fall. Okay, so that's FAFSA, one important part of the application process. Another equally important part is just building out your entire application. So I would love to hear from you, Mandy. At TCU, do you guys review applications holistically? And really, like, what specific whether positive or negative things do you guys consider in an application?
That's great. I'm at the Common App conference, and the Common Application. I'm not a spokesperson for them, but I love the way that their application is laid out, and I love that there are multiple schools that you can submit the application to without having to reapply to each individual school. So there may be some supplemental questions that are added per institution, and it just kind of facilitates an easy process. At TCU, we do a holistic review on all of the admission candidates. So you are not just a number, you're not a test score, you're not a GPA, you're not the number of math classes, you're not your accommodation. This is a review of you, and we want to know you through the process. So one of the great pieces of the Common Application is it walks you through all of the questions that we would want answers to. And then we ask you for a resume. So we want to see what you've done outside of the classroom. And it's okay if your main involvement was marching band and you were on the field at 7 a.m. and then you competed all winter long. And then and you look back at your 4 years in high school and most of your commitments have been in one particular area. That's okay. We like angular students because once we have lots of angular students at our institution, we have a very well-rounded, excellent student body. So don't forget to fill in the resume piece of it. We're not looking for you to do a little bit of everything. We'd rather see you do something with commitment and intention over the course of your time in high school. So think about what those pieces are, draw those out, highlight those. Really, this is your way of us getting to know you. We're asking you questions like we would in an interview, and we're evaluating you on those responses. Some of them are specific to TCU. We want to know how you align with some of our mission, vision, values. Some of them are just questions for you, like your essay. You get to choose what you would like to write on. And then you can request a letter of recommendation from a teacher and a counselor. And I would encourage you to start thinking through who those people are. But all of those pieces add up to the whole of you. So if you find yourself repeating yourself multiple times on the application, I would say go back and change some of those answers so that you're revealing more of yourself as you submit the whole of the application. We also allow students to submit what we call a freedom of expression piece. And the freedom of expression may be unique to us. We love them personally. It is anything that you would like to send us. We have received everything from a paper mache surfboard to grandma's apple pie to a collage of students' favorite things. And this is up to you. One of my favorites was a first generation student who had applied for admission. And if you'll let me tell a story real fast, he had written about how his family had supported him to graduate high school and how he was really excited about going to college. And I open up this freedom of expression and it's a dude in workout attire, like grunting through the biggest deadlift and screaming. And I was like, okay. And then he turns the camera to him and he's like, hey, I'm so glad you watched that. When I was in high school and I started school, I was overweight and an older kid asked me to start going to the gym with him. and I started working out. And that's what I showed you was my 1 rep max of a deadlift 4 years later. So sometimes it can be a small snippet that helps show a different dimension to you. And we do get to consider that in our review process. So if you're wondering if anybody will ever read your essays and all of the work, I guarantee you at TCU, we read over 20,000 applications, all 12, 13 pages of them, and they're reviewed by multiple reviewers. So it's important to us.
That was a really great story. And it makes me think, like Rennie, how at Class 101 do you work with students to help them stand out, like Mandy just shared?
Well, I think that is the question, right? In a more competitive environment, with schools receiving thousands of applications, how do you stand out? That's the question of the day. What I would say is this: first and foremost, there is a difference, a major difference between a completed application and a competitive application. Frankly, you do not need my services as a college planner and I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence to tell them that you need my services as a college planner to help you complete an application. I mean, you can fill in the blanks and answer the questions. It is a totally different game when you're putting together a competitive application in a competitive package. And the things that Mandy shared with you, I hope you were listening. You are trying to identify what makes you unique and what makes you stand out. It could be the breadth of things you've done. Oftentimes, it's more the depth of something you've done, right? And, so you may have early in your high school career tried a lot of different things out, but you identified your passion and you started to go deep into that field, and that shows something about self-awareness and commitment that an admissions officer is going to like to see. It does not necessarily have to be extracurriculars. You could come from a single family home where you made outstanding grades and you also had to work 30 hours a week to help support your
We want
family.
to know.
Yeah, to help support your family, to help pay the bills. So maybe you weren't able to be on the football team. Maybe you weren't able to be involved in different things. You went to school and you went to work. But that is equally important, and in some ways more impressive. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out how you are different. How do you stand out? And I think the most important thing to hear is don't minimize what you think just is normal. Well, this is normal, and this is no, don't minimize it. But truly, what really is important is you have to find that expert that can walk alongside you. Ultimately, you have to find that expert that has helped people before create those competitive applications, whether that's a high school counselor. I always strongly encourage my students to build some type of relationship with the admissions counselors at the schools they're looking at, because they can be guides as well. And obviously, I'm a fan of having your own college planner in your corner, but those kind of guides can help you identify what's unique about yourself and make sure that stands out very well in your application, whether it's the resume, whether it's a Common App, whether it's your essays, whether it's your supplemental essays, wherever it is. Because what this is doing is it's telling the story of you. And ultimately, what people who sit in chairs like Mandy Castro, she is a recruiting agent. She is a talent scout for TCU. She's trying to find the most talented people she can that represents the values of TCU and project their future success at TCU. And so in your application packet, you are trying to stand out and show why you belong and why you will be a great benefit and addition to their campus community.
One of the things that I would add, Rennie, is if you have the means to travel to the schools that you're interested in, show up on our campuses.
Yes.
Please come to our schools, take a tour, meet your admission person. We may be able to get to your schools, but we're not going to be able to get to all of them. And we want to know you. And it's so much better to read an application that has a face and a story and a name, and then you get to peel back the layers and know them better than it is to figure out, does Rennie really have an interest in our institution? Or was Carissa really fond of us? Or did we just fill that 10th spot in the Common App that they wanted to send something to? So I would say engage with us. follow up. If you have questions, don't have mom and dad reach out to us. We want to know you. So your communications go much further, and it can be as quick as an email.
Yeah.
In fact, I think admission counselors are on the road so much that they appreciate an email or a text over a phone call, because normally they have to get back to phone calls a little bit later simply because of their travel schedules. But yeah, I think that's an important piece of it. Some schools will go so far as to track all of this and rate you on demonstrated interest. We're not doing that. However, it does show your interest, and don't forget that in the process.
I think, especially in this world where I talked about earlier, there's those whimsical applicants, right? That helps an admissions officer, where that relationship is established, going, oh no, they're serious. I mean, I can't imagine, Mandy, deciding where to go to college and never officially visiting that campus. I mean, in my world, that is a big no-no, right? We officially visit a campus before we attend, for sure, ideally before we apply. And here's the other one. You mentioned it. A college admissions officer may not be able to visit your high school, but if they do, stop by and talk to them. Build a relationship with them. For God's sake, skip lunch with your friends and go meet the person who might help you get admitted and get scholarships to the school you're interested in attending. It will be worth missing the lunch with your friends that one time.
Can I tell a story on that?
Oh, please.
Okay, so when in my first job, which Rennie probably remembers, my first job in admissions was at the University of Oklahoma. And this petite blonde girl from Broken Arrow High School called me and said, hey, I got out of Spanish class because I wanted to talk to you. And Broken Arrow at that time did not let the University of Oklahoma in for a school visit. So those of you in Oklahoma who are listening, that's the largest school in the state. And it was like, hard stop. No, you're not coming in. But she called me from her Spanish class. I nominated her for the president's leadership class. She ended up attending the University of Oklahoma. She was a big woman on campus, and she's the assistant vice president right now of university admissions there. So my relationship with Morgan Brammer started when she was a senior in high school, and I've gotten to watch her navigate this whole process. But I knew a name and a face and her accomplishments, and it just really helped her in the process as well. She was an advocate for herself. She didn't have her folks reach out to me. She was one who took the initiative herself.
I can name my recruiter from the University of Oklahoma, Tracy Roberson.
Yep.
1992. I can't tell you the person who recruited me from the University of Texas or Southern Methodist University, but I remember Tracy Roberson. The lesson here, guys, is relationships. Relationships come before opportunity, and in a competitive environment out there, where there's thousands of applicants, right? You know how you want to set yourself apart and build your relationship where they know you, and step outside of your comfort zone and build a relationship with the admissions counselor assigned to your school. And if you can't figure out who that is, you get your high school counselor, find a college planner, and they can help you figure out who that person will be.
Absolutely. Our admission counselors need to keep jobs too, so know us.
Well, and thank you, because we just got in the chat that this is great. They love all the stories, and it's not all about SAT and ACT scores. It is like the holistic person and who they present, and the connections and the relationships, like you were saying, Rennie. So thank you guys for sharing those examples. And please, as you guys have questions, we will pause and take them throughout. So pop into the Q&A, because we'd love to hear from you. So I would love to switch to a hot topic, this thing called ChatGPT. Everybody's doing it, but ChatGPT and the college admissions process. I mean, Mandy, maybe I'll start with you, but what impact has technology like ChatGPT had on, specifically, let's talk about the college essay.
Yeah, so ChatGPT has really started to surface in the past 2 to 3 years, where now most institutions are running a counter AI through the evaluation process for the essays. We've always had kind of eyes, like I've had admission counselors in California that are like, I've read this essay 2 or 3 times. And so they would find even plagiarized essays through the process, just having read so many, and we start to see them kind of pop here and there. We actually train our staff on the difference between a self-written essay and a bot-written essay, and although the grammar is perfect, it completely lacks you. I did just a test of this. My boss just got a new job, and we had kind of a transition going away from our building party for him. And I wrote my remarks for him on ChatGPT, and it was the most generic thing in the world. And it said, "Insert boss name here." And although it said wonderful things like, "You've been a leader, you've been so strong, thank you for all you've done for us," it was completely void of any piece that was him. And I couldn't use it. I laughed at it, and I was like, I just can't use this. So I would say, if you're stuck on your essay and you can't figure out what to write, have ChatGPT be an idea generator for you, but you can't go in and take what it generates and only edit a couple of words because it still sounds like ChatGPT. Go in and let it idea generate for you. And then from there, take the ideas and make them your own. So that would be the best use I would see for it. Please don't get in the habit of doing this. All of your professors are running all of your papers through this, and it's considered academic misconduct and reasons for you to leave a university. So get in the business of practicing this now. Write out an outline. Work with your family. Work with your class consultants. Work with your counselors in your schools, and make something that's very personal to you. I've seen some really cool essays through the process, and they range everything from the student who I told you about, who was first generation, to a very animated future scientist who collected lizards and all of the things that she found. And her mom had this menagerie of all kinds of animals that she had kind of picked up along the way. You can show your personality through it and make it very much yours without it sounding like a generic bot wrote it.
I 100% agree, Mandy. I tell you, I hope everyone heard, there's this thing called counter AI. Your essay can be reviewed and it'll tell you whether ChatGPT or AI generated it, right? That's not
We've
just
actually rescinded some of those offers of admission as well.
I mean, that is a real deal. That is a real deal for college too. Equally, if not more importantly, it is plagiarism and academic misconduct in college. So make sure you're aware of those things. I think the other thing is, she said, there's no heart in it. And a good college essay has heart, right? It's a little bit vulnerable. It shares your personality. And, at Class 101, one of the things we really take pride in is really teaching our students how to write an outstanding college essay. Because, Chris, like you said earlier, this is a way you can stand out, right? It's a place where you can tell a story about yourself that differentiates you and makes you unique and shares something about you that other people may not know, but also it has the point of why this characteristic, why this thing about you will make you a great addition to a campus community and help you be more competitive. So I think, you need to write it, student, you need to write it. ChatGPT does not need to write it. Now, let me say something else. As a person who's read thousands of essays myself, mom and dad, do not write it. I know it does not look perfect. It shouldn't. It's written by a high school senior that's 17 or 18 years old. And when they're writing this, I want you to consider this. They haven't even graduated high school yet. Okay. So it should definitely not sound like someone who has a master's degree or a law degree. It should not sound like an adult. And it's a good way for me to know that it sounds like it's not the student that I know that Jimmy didn't write the essay when in the essay it says Jimmy did this and Jimmy did that, because Jimmy probably doesn't refer to himself as a third person. I hope not. Right. So there's ways we can tell even when it wasn't ChatGPT, but it wasn't the student who wrote it. It needs to be in the student's authentic voice. It needs to sound like a high school senior, and it needs to share a story about themselves that makes them unique, that makes them stand out, and that shows the campus admissions officer like Mandy that this student is going to bring something special here and can be successful here.
Yeah, we got a great question that I want to throw to the both of you. And I feel like I can relate to this a little bit, but in the question in the chat said, my kids tell me, thanks for giving me such a normal upbringing. Now they don't feel like they have anything to write about in their college essay. Like, Rennie, how do you work with students? And then Mandy, I'd love to hear your perspective too.
Yeah, there is, first of all, in our three-step process of teaching students and helping students write a college essay, we have a three-step process. Number one, it's they got to know what a good college essay is and is not. All right. First of all, there's lots of misunderstandings about what a good college essay is, and they need to understand that that's typically not right. It's not that standard 5-paragraph essay where you have an introduction and 3 points and a closing paragraph. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a story. And so the first thing we need to do is help students understand, how do you write a story? The second thing that a college essay is not about is it's typically not about something other than themselves. They are the protagonist in the story. They've had great coaches and they've had great teachers and mentors and parents and grandparents. That is the supporting cast, right? They have to have, this is about them as students. But then, so once they know what a good essay is, how do you get to answer this question? How do you get to great content? Well, we take students through it through a creative process, asking them questions for them to ponder, like, when is a moment that you've let somebody down? What is the proudest moment you've ever experienced? What is a failure that you've learned from? We help students just go through what we call moments in their life that we've all had, and they start pondering those moments. We have students go through a values exercise so they start understanding their own values and what's important to them. And then we help them start understanding, are these big moments in their life connected to the values that they've had? So there's a process in bringing out this vulnerable personal genius that's in a student that really, really helps create an authentic and just a winning essay. So it is a process, but I think the thing to answer this question, it's not what you think it is.
Sure.
And that's going to keep you from sounding just like any other essay. Mandy, what would you say?
I would, to the mom who had a very normal life for her children, I applaud you. And I think that what is misconstrued in the market is that there has to be trauma to equal something extraordinary. And I fully, wholeheartedly disagree with that. We're not in a business of capitalizing on trauma in a college essay. And if you've had something traumatic happen, then we want to feel with you instead of checking it off like, oh, we got 2 of these, right? That's not our interest at all. I personally, I lost my father probably 7 years ago. And when I read about students who have lost their families, I email them as I'm reading their essays because I feel for them in those spaces. But oftentimes students don't understand what a good essay is.
Yeah.
And so if a student is seeking for that like pivotal moment, sometimes it's the consistency of who you are. Sometimes it's your quirky organization. Sometimes it's your love for that you catch and you see, or why it is every time I take a trip, I see a coyote, sometimes there are some fun essays that are written through these different little quirks that students have accumulated over their lifetime after having a very normal life. And I just think that there's some fun ways for them to demonstrate that.
One of the best essays I ever read was a student who read about her hobby as a gardener. So and she had all these plants, but the lessons she learned about learning to be a gardener. And it was and she just brought her in. And how did she do it? Well, it wasn't about gardening, it was about her. And she told a story, and it was just so well done. So it doesn't, I 100%, I love how Mandy said that we are not trying to capitalize on people's trauma. That's a real deal. And those issues do happen, but you do not have to have that kind of trauma or that kind of challenge to write a good college essay.
Right.
There's a question you create, Carissa, I'd like to tackle.
Yeah.
It says,
go ahead.
we did a college tour with an admissions presentation, and they specifically stated that emailing just to introduce yourself was not a good practice. So you just ask a question, even though you might have found the information. How do you navigate this? I'm going to answer this and then let Mandy say what she would prefer. My standard thing that I ask my students to do is to identify who the admissions counselor is for their school. So I show them how to go on the website. I show them how to identify who's responsible for their high school. And then I have them craft an email. What's the general gist of this email? Hey, my name is so-and-so. I'm in this grade. I'm interested in these things. And then I have them ask 2 questions. Number 1, do you plan on attending my high school anytime so I can connect with you then? The second question I have them ask also, is there a good time for me to visit your campus so I can see firsthand what you have to offer? So it's not just an introduction of themselves. I'm having that student ask the admissions counselor 2 questions. Do you have a time that you are planning to attend my school or visit my school so I can make sure and mark that on my calendar and we can meet? And do you have a specific event coming up or a special time that you would suggest that I visit the campus? That's how I have our students reach out. Mandy, what are your thoughts?
It depends on the student. If you've already found the answer and that's obvious, then don't email us for it. But if there's lots of communication that goes from, for instance, me to the students, if there's a response to one of those that they want to reply to, then I get that reply, and that's demonstrated interest. It doesn't have to be simply a proactive outreach from them to one of us. That can be the case. Some students say, hey, I just wanted to let you know I submitted my application. I've requested for my teachers to send in their pieces of the application as well. Sometimes that's all you need. As far as like just generating conversation to generate conversation, I don't think that's necessary. But I'm coming from a place that doesn't track demonstrated interest in that way. I think that that's where it would be good to know the schools that you're applying to.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
That's great.
Hope
Yeah,
that answers their question.
Yeah, and we have time for more, so please
Yes.
jump into the Q&A if you have more questions that you would like to ask Mandy and Rennie. While they're doing that, Rennie, I'm just curious. I mean, again, we started this by talking about just all the changes that are happening. How do you recommend that students and families really keep abreast of like the changes in the admissions process, like this the colleges that they're interested at?
Carissa, I think the dynamic that parents need to understand, like myself, I'm a parent of a high school student, God help me. But it's different. It's different than when I applied to college. And in a lot of the ways we've talked about tonight, we can't assume as parents that it's the same way we went to college. Things have changed. It has become extremely, extremely more complicated in many ways. It's not near as straightforward. You do not see as often what are called assured admissions, where schools just post their admission standards and you know you're in even before you apply, or you know you're not in. The same with scholarships. Oftentimes you won't know if you'll get scholarships, right? It's become much more unclear. There's a lot of questions about it, and unfortunately, it's become more costly. I think my time at OU maybe it was under $50,000. I guarantee you that. And it's just unfortunately cost more money. So if you're going to navigate this, you really, really need to develop your expertise. How do you do that? You research. You're going to have to do lots of research. You're going to have to be researching about, the entirety of the college admissions world, and you're going to have to research these schools that your student is interested in applying. You need to develop a relationship with these admissions officers and these admissions counselors. You need to be best friends and a regular guest in your high school counselor's office. I mean, there's some things that you have to do to really develop the expertise to be the educated consumer you need to be when you're making a 6-figure investment. That's where college planning has become more prevalent. When I was making my decision on where to go to college in the early 90s, it was a smaller investment that doesn't necessarily need the expert of a planner. But now we know that the investment is much greater, and it's in the same way you can buy a home. You can buy a home without a realtor, right? You can do that. But most of us want a realtor who does this for a living each and every day, to dot the I's, to cross the T's, to take away a lot of the stress, to know that there's an expert looking at this, helping them move through the process. And I think that's where a college planner makes sense. And that's where where families start seeing a return on investment by having that expert walk alongside them, because there is so much more change, so much changing each and every year, each and every month, really. And it's an extremely competitive environment.
Yeah, great. We got some questions around college visits. So Mandy, maybe I can throw these to you and I'll combine because we've got a couple of them that are pretty similar. But
Sure.
when do you recommend that students start to visit colleges? And when they do attend a college visit, should they meet with an admissions counselor? And when the student determines their top school, should they do another visit? Like, can you just tell us how you guys approach college
Yeah,
visits?
those are great questions. I would say start the exploration process sometime between your sophomore and junior year. And start looking at pick some big schools, some small schools, private schools, public schools, regional schools. Get a variety in there that you're starting to visit. They don't have to be far from home, but just get the idea. You can walk on a campus of 40,000 people and understand whether it's going to be a good fit for you or not. You can walk onto a campus of 2,000 people and understand if that's going to be a good fit for you or not. And that's important in the process. So I would say anytime during that, I would also look for like their preview days. So at TCU, we host these Mondays at TCU that give you a pretty comprehensive look at the campus. Other schools are going to host something very similar. So take a look at their website, see what the visits look like. And that might be a good way to get your toes wet and say, okay, this one's worth exploring to put on my list for application. Once you've started to narrow down your list, it would be good to take a second look if you haven't quite decided yet. If you're looking at one or two different schools and you're down to the wire, not knowing which one you're going to choose, that's a good opportunity for a secondary visit. And I would encourage that. Just taking a last look helps you know whether you're going to feel the sense of belonging, whether it meets the other aspects of your college experience that you're going to choose. Most schools are going to have a biology major. So which biology major do you want? Do you want the biology major that has X number of students alongside you or a smaller number of students alongside you? Do you feel like you can contribute to the campus community, et cetera? So those are just layers that you'll peel back as you go through the process. So I think there's value in a bunch of different options there.
Yeah, that's great.
I would add also that, one of the things that, you want to visit a campus. The question was in there, when should I visit campus? Junior, senior, those types of things. And I agree with everything Mandy said. But ideally visit campus when school's in session.
Right.
I mean, if you have no better options, I know summer's oftentimes a great chance to get on campuses because our schedules are more clear. But there is something different when you visit a campus in schools actually in session, because now you feel the life and the heart and the true culture of that campus. So I would encourage, to tour campuses as often as you can. But at the same time, I would encourage you to, before you make a final decision, tour the campus while class is in session and you actually get to see the students on campus. The other question that was in the chat screen I want to touch on real quickly is what the advice I would give my student if they're visiting a campus, let's say to a TCU and they're visiting, and Mandy is the representative, the missions counselor for Norman at TCU. I would just send Mandy a note saying, hey, I'm going to be on campus touring on this day. If by chance we have a chance to connect, I'd love that. Not tying her down, not asking her for anything, but just letting her know I'm going to be on campus. And if by chance we're able to connect, then that gives Mandy the opportunity. Maybe she can have a meeting with me, or maybe she can step downstairs and chat with me real quick before the tour. Once again, trying to build that relationship.
And there's your demonstrated interest.
There's your demonstrated interest, right? So yes, I would definitely let my admissions counselor know I'm visiting campus, and if by chance we have a chance to connect, I'd love to do that.
But don't just awkwardly stare at him, ask a question.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I will echo some of the feedback that we got in the chat too about how valuable this was. So Mandy and Rennie, thank you guys so much. And I appreciate the questions and you may have more. So we at Class 101 are here to help. I'll just plug that we have over 60 locations around the US that have a ton of experienced college planners that are really eager to help you and your family on this journey of college admissions. Also, if you don't see a location near you, we do work with students virtually. So please contact us. I put the email address up on the screen, info@class101.com. So we and the Class 101 family are here to help. And Mandy, again, thank you for sharing your expertise. Rennie, thank you as well. And we appreciate your time and thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.